So our two alternative approaches. You can take a look at these bubble diagrams. We put these together to try to boil down the key ideas of each of these two scenarios, because when you're looking at small building footprints, you can get a little lost, and the big ideas can be hard to find. So we put these bubbles together to show you both the kinds of development we're proposing for different areas within each of these two scenarios, and also give you a sense of the kind of intensity and the adjacencies that we're prioritizing. So you can see with the light yellow bubbles being residential and the red ones being retail and office, you can kind of see the distributions of residential areas versus those areas that might have a more commercial profile. And we'll get into the reasons for why each of these locations were chosen within these alternatives. Basically, the four factors that we use to determine these different uses and where they should go, we're looking at economic activity. Again, where can we catalyze and concentrate that economic activity in a way that is realistic and strategic? Growth. We know that Sterling Heights is going to grow. We know that there are projections for new housing demand in the future. We saw the products that are recommended. So we're going to look for places to accommodate a good amount of that residential growth here at Van Dyke Avenue. Placemaking, those elements that we discussed, those 10 elements, those have driven a lot of the decisions as to where we're locating certain uses. And then the community's desired characteristics. I showed you that map with all the different ideas kind of fireworking off of the sub-districts. We found places for those, and we thought a lot about where those kind of adjacencies would be best situated. So here are the two options. At the end of this sequence, we'll show you sort of the full picture of each of them and the individual components that go into each, but we thought by stripping away layer by layer, you'd be able to see where these concentrations exist. So first, economic activity. So this is retail, commercial uses, office uses, and the industrial uses, many of which are already on site. You can see there are a couple of different strategies for the exact location of each of these concentrations of retail and commercial activity. And in some cases, namely in option 1, there's a lot more industrial than you see in option 2. Growth. We're employing a couple different strategies for housing here. On alternative 1, we've really concentrated the housing to serve as a transition from existing neighborhoods onto the Van Dyke Avenue corridor, whereas in option 2, we've tried to cluster it at the center, at the core of the district to create a real dense neighborhood feel there and create a nice concentration of those new residential products. Placemaking. I won't get into all the layers in this diagram, but suffice to say, we've thought a lot about the interaction of all these uses in the spaces that we're proposing. And those placemaking elements go from just the design of the place, the urban design and the uses of the street and the buildings, to making sure we're thinking strategically about how to capitalize on those authentic components that make Sterling Heights and Van Dyke Avenue unique, namely the industrial uses on the site. And then community desires. So each one of these white labels that you see was pulled directly from the opportunity mapping or the surveys that we asked the community to participate in following the first workshop. These were all ideas that came directly from you and your fellow community members, and we wanted to be conscious of what you were asking for and strategic about where we found room for it in the plan. So you'll see some of these as we get into the detail and what it's planned for, what's kind of adjacent to all these different uses, and why we located them there. So alternative 1, for lack of a better name, we're calling this the Main Street, where the retail uses and the full length of the Van Dyke corridor is considered from a kind of traditional Main Street perspective, and you see the development starting to take shape in that way. You can see in the northernmost section, we're prioritizing up against the Clinton River, a kind of natural landscape and gardens feel, a soft transition from the corridor into Van Dyke Avenue. We see opportunities for commercial infill to build off of what is working already in those locations. As I mentioned before, the neighborhoods are transitioning onto the corridor, so single family uses and in some cases multifamily will step up in density as they reach the corridor. looking closely at the gateways, of course. And in this option, we're thinking about how to build off of the industrial uses and create relationships between new development and existing development that is meaningful and creates an exciting future for the industrial uses near Van Dyke. Here we've started to take to just zoom in to the option and show you what's going on in our two schemes here. So in the first one, we're looking at the core, this Main Street option. You can see on the leftmost, we're setting as a gateway to the core some office development. It's not a lot on the site, but we think it could be a good use as it's a development type that serves well as a gateway. We're looking at the options of urban townhouse style development and multifamily over retail development in the core right at the intersection of Van Dyke and Utica Road. And you can see that taking shape in a couple different ways. And keep in mind, these footprints are largely conceptual. We've thought about the different building types as to where they should go, but the exact uses are still flexible, of course. And then we saw a real opportunity at the intersection of Van Dyke Avenue and Utica Road to create a central gathering space for the community, whether it's a park or a plaza or some combination of the two with a civic use. It would create a nice front lawn for these new residential developments. And as we tell our clients all the time and our client communities, the presence of this kind of high quality public open space, parks, plazas, things like this, really do have a positive impact on property values. So they themselves can help be catalysts, and they can help raise the profile and attractiveness of the Van Dyke Avenue corridor. And as you can see, the little arm of green that's stretching down into the Clinton River Greenway, we see a real opportunity here to connect to that greenway. That arm of land that plugs into the west of the greenway is a great asset, and we think that it can be capitalized on in some interesting ways. One thing I should have noted at the beginning, I apologize, we have, for this sequence of drawings, we've flipped the map on its side 90 degrees. So north is to the right, and west is at the top. At the old, or rather the strip mall to the south, where there used to be the Kroger, we see great potential for infill development. A variety of forms could take shape here. We think retail makes a lot of sense. You can create something of a retail plaza to really fill out that parcel and create a better, more pedestrian-oriented retail experience there. And then you're seeing at the kind of center site, coming from the south, you have the opportunity to do something of a signature multifamily retail development facing onto the park and public space. I'll go through the rest of these a little bit more quickly, but now that you're oriented to it, hopefully it won't be too confusing. You can see in this option, or rather for alternative one in the northwesternmost sub-district, which we're calling North Utica, we see this as an opportunity to create nice transitions from the existing residential zones to the north and to the west of the corridor. So you see how townhouse development could potentially take shape with some designated open space that creates, again, that front lawn for these new developments. And you can see we're fronting Van Dyke Avenue, given that this is the kind of Main Street concept, we're trying to keep as much of the retail activity on Van Dyke Avenue as possible. So we're filling in some of these sites with more dense and more urban in character residential. We see there as a potential to be some really interesting and vibrant outdoor spaces close to this retail. There's an existing kind of cultural institution next to the strip mall to the west of Van Dyke Avenue. We think that if that stays or transforms in the long term, we could build out some outdoor spaces for that, which could also start to connect to the forthcoming Chaldean Foundation development just to the east of this district. And as you see in the middle of all of this, we're approaching each of these alternatives from the perspective of a shared parking strategy, where we're tucking as much of it behind the development as possible, and it can become flexible. With urban development of this type, ideally you see less vehicular trips in total, because you're able to work in the same place that you're shopping, in the same place that you're living, and patterns like that. So hopefully less vehicular trips overall will support a better shared parking strategy. In what we're calling the kind of Riverside sub-district, the sites up here are somewhat challenged by the flood issues. So we see there to be great opportunity to really expand and build upon the Clinton River Greenway. We're saying if there is potential to do development in that kind of northernmost site just south of the river, then potentially you could front it with some denser housing of either a traditional neighborhood development style or something like townhouses. And then in the back, you can really use those park spaces creatively and create a variety of different landscapes. We heard from the community that a community garden might work well here. And in close proximity to the housing, we think that's true as well. There's potential for more natural playscapes. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some great playgrounds in these areas near the river. We're seeing an extension of that retail infill at the strip mall site. And we think that there's an opportunity along that green arm that connects into the river for some kind of recreational service. We heard that people are interested in bike rental, bike repair shops, that kind of thing. We think this could be a location for that. And then finally, for the southernmost sub-district, what we're calling kind of South Van Dyke Industrial, there's a lot of existing industrial uses here. We see potential to build on that. One of the ideas that rose in prominence when we presented to the community was this idea of a local history museum. Perhaps there's an opportunity to tuck that into the larger industrial fabric of the city and create a real draw here for both locals and visitors. We were thinking about the opportunity to implement some new and exciting civic uses, like a vocational school that could serve to teach the future workforce of these exciting industrial operations and provide a great space for learners here on Van Dyke Avenue. We heard interest in something like a brewery or distillery. This is a great opportunity in terms of a placemaking strategy, something that people love to do, love to participate in, and it fits in really well in an industrial context and can actually celebrate and build on that reputation and legacy. We saw that the community was really interested in this idea of a shared kind of lunch or event plaza. This could be potentially a lower investment kind of public space that could take on a variety of different forms and could serve the industrial users, the residents, the people who work in and are visiting the retail shops there. And we think that retail itself can be a strategy that builds on the industrial legacy. If we created something that was a little bit more temporary and flexible in terms of a market for the products that were made here, then there would be an opportunity potentially to sell that, showcase it, and bring people to the area. So that's alternative one. We won't get into the numbers for the sake of time, and we'll go through option two a lot faster now that you're kind of oriented to it. For option two, we are looking at more active recreation, more utilization of the river and the greenway. We've got more clustered approach to retail and commercial. You can see there are kind of two designated zones of this retail activity. And we're looking at some of those civic uses up in the north. In the core, you're seeing mostly residential. Again, we've got a community park, something a little bit more oriented towards the residential properties at the southern intersection of Van Dyke Avenue and Utica Road. We're looking at multifamily, we're looking at townhouses, we're looking at retail infill strategically in a lot of the same locations. And in this option, we've prominently placed office kind of at the center as more high-profile office development. For the northwesternmost district, North Utica, we're saying, okay, maybe there's an opportunity for some kind of academic use here, whether it's a local academic use or some kind of extension school that celebrates STEM and maker kind of strategies. And in close adjacency to that, you could have some office use that creates this kind of academic and industry fusion. We see that a lot with new academic investments, thinking strategically about them. We're saying maybe there's an opportunity for a civic facility to support the residential, the academic, and some of the other uses here, whether it be a library or something else. And some of the existing in the small-scale industrial fabric could be continued with new space that could be used for burgeoning businesses and ideas. In the Riverside District, we're looking at active recreation. We heard that there was interest in softball fields the last time we spoke to the community. There's interest in recreation facilities, as you remember from the word cloud. Someone had an idea, or actually a couple of people had this idea of putting some riverfront dining along the Clinton River, and we think that there may be opportunity if the right kind of stormwater or floodplain mitigation strategies are employed to do that somewhere up in this district. It's a really unique natural space. And in the south, what we're looking at here is, again, preserving and building off of that industrial use, but we're saying, what if we actually aim to celebrate it even more loudly? What if we, if these facilities, as they expanded and changed hands and new uses were to come into them, new architectural and development strategies were employed that started to show what was going on inside the facilities to the community, to the street, and they became active participants in the street environment, the streetscape. Again, we're looking at options for some public space to support the workers here and the people who will come to Van Dyke Avenue in the future. Potentially, there's opportunity to utilize the kind of gritty feel of the area to create a food truck plaza or some kind of event space. We see there being opportunities for new infill, smaller, potentially industrial or supplier operations for some of the big plants that exist nearby. And we see there being potential for gateway retail that really announces the presence of this area as a different kind of place within the corridor. And again, I'm sorry, we just won't have time to get into the numbers, but we'll have this all available for you to take a look at. So if you participated in the first community workshop, the Menti platform should be familiar with you. But as for part of this, we want to get feedback from you on what you think of the ideas that we showed. If you want to plug into Menti, go to menti.com and enter the code that you see here. We're going to put some questions on the screen. And what this allows us to do is engage you in conversation and get those responses in real time. On screen. It's really fun, it's pretty easy to use, and we encourage you to do it. So you can just either on your smartphone or on your computer, just navigate to Menti, type in this code, and we will resume with some questions in a moment. And you should be able to see the slides from this presentation on screen once you log on to Menti and enter that code in. And your screen will update as I move in the presentation. And the first question we have for you all is, of these two development schemes, which one struck you as the most appropriate for Van Dyke Avenue in the future? Which scheme did you prefer? And if you are having any trouble with Menti, feel free to just type it in the chat box. You can reach out to Fernando Turpin. He's a member of our project team, and he can guide you through any issues that you might be having. Great, we'll give folks just a couple more minutes to respond here. Now, what we also want to do is encourage you to give us some color commentary to why it is that you selected this. Does anyone have anything they want to contribute and tell us about these schemes? Feel free to unmute yourself and give us any comments you may have.
I have a thought. This is Mark. I actually really liked Alternative 1, but what I liked about Alternative 2, it seems like there was greater use of probably the greatest asset out there, and that's the Green Belt and the Clinton River and Bike Hike Trail, and the outdoor dining concept along the river is especially intriguing. Obviously, there's lots of hurdles and logistics and land acquisition and mitigation and all sorts of challenges with all this, but it's a vision. And that's what really drew me to alternative two. But I think both are incredibly intriguing.
Great, thanks very much, Mark.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Any other thoughts?
This is Derek D'Angelo. I was just thinking the exact same thing Mark was, because there were aspects of two that I really liked, but I do like the overall vision of one, so I ended up voting with one. But I would definitely want to pick apart a couple things from alternative two and put it into one in some way.
Well, that is great, and I'll tell you the dirty little secret of planning when it comes to alternatives like this. Ultimately, I think it's safe to say not one of these will be pushed forward, but rather we'll collect the elements of both of them and combine them to some degree into a scheme that meets the community's needs and goals. So you're actually leading really nicely into our next set of questions, which for the sake of time, I will move on to. Which of these ideas resonated most strongly with you, or did you see as appropriate for the future? You can type in your answers, or by all means, feel free to type them in and speak them. We'd love to hear from you too. Okay. Beer garden on the Clinton River, love it. Park space, definitely in need. Some folks think we don't need any more retail. Okay. Beer garden, I had a feeling that one would be popular after workshop one. Don't really enjoy the idea of Van Dyke being a destination. Interesting. Capitalizing existing locations and features. Great. Does anyone want to add any commentary to this? I love seeing these answers come in, and this will all get funneled into our process, but it's always good to hear folks describe their thoughts. Food truck zone seems good. Okay.
I guess the one question I have, and what I did not see, but which might be there, I'm Michael Radke, I'm on the city council, is alleys or pedestrian zones that could have lighting or tables or be almost not tied to one establishment or restaurant, but which could be a zone that other people could build around.
Great to have you. Thank you. And yes, for sure, those elements were in there. One other note I wanted to make to folks is there are kind of two scales of this work that takes shape. The first is what we're looking at today, which is zoomed out fairly high. As you can see, we're looking at the whole corridor at once. Once we zoom in a little bit to these districts, we really get started doing the fun stuff, which is thinking strategically about the placemaking aspects and thinking about how to create real vibrant places in each of these sub-districts. We've started to do a little bit of that. For the sake of time, we kind of zoomed through it, but it is great to hear that is of interest to folks. And you'll see more of that as the work evolves. Okay, great. We're going to move on to the next questions for the sake of time, but rest assured all of these notes are being captured. One of the things that we are interested in is zooming into that second level of detail. How can we effectively program and activate Van Dyke Avenue? You've seen some of the elements of the redevelopment vision, the types of uses that we think could be appropriate here and that we heard from all of you could be appropriate here. What kind of events do you think should take shape here? What should we be making space for and thinking ahead about in terms of activating Van Dyke Avenue? Are there any particular retail uses or other kinds of things, civic facilities, anything like that come to mind? Food trucks near employment, interesting. Performing arts, that's a great idea. Yeah, certainly something that would fit well in a variety of the civic spaces. We need buy-in from the city of Utica. Could not agree more. I will say we've been fortunate to be collaborating a bit with the city of Utica. We had some conference calls with members of their city council, as well as their new mayor, who also may be joining us today, I heard. Focus on river initiatives, closed streets for events, bike rental and bike hub, cultural food outlets. These are all great. Does anyone like to speak to any of this? We'd love to hear any thoughts.
Just a comment, you know, when we think about what has already worked for communities, including Sterling Heights, in terms of placemaking and becoming focal points and attracting people, no question, public art is a key ingredient. Recreational amenities undoubtedly bring people together. Look at the city campus center in Dodge Park and the ice rink. You know, in the middle of this pandemic where people can't go out, if you go to the ice rink tonight, you'll find 100 people on it easily. And if we could increase the limit, there'd be 200 people on it tonight. And any given day in the summer, if you go to the skate park by the court building, it's just jam packed with kids. And you know, I don't always subscribe to this, but if you build it, they will come. And that certainly proved true in these circumstances, and including the community center, although it really hasn't fully opened yet because of the COVID pandemic. It is going to be wildly successful. I mean, people are just clamoring to use it. So those are it's kind of low-hanging fruit that brings people together.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. We're really excited about the investments the city has made in those areas in particular, and its proximity to the corridor. We hope that it can serve as momentum for growth here as well. Okay, great. Again, just for the sake of time, we're going to move along. Thank you for these contributions. And then you may have already submitted some ideas in the former sections, but we'd love to hear what else should we be exploring? What didn't you see that should be discussed for the future of Van Dyke Avenue? Science Center, interesting. Microgrid power, cool. Distillery. Excellent. Yep, mass transit connectivity. We're certainly going to be looking at ways we can improve existing service, so that's great. Seeing seconded Science Center, love it. Streetcars, cool. We'll give folks just a few more moments to submit some ideas here. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to be posting a virtual community board with each of these slides laid out where you'll be free to look at it at your own pace and submit your own comments. So don't think you've missed your chance if you didn't enter your idea right now. This is great, thank you. We're going to move on.